You came back. Good. Pull up a chair and try not to make a sound. This is the last whisper. There were two little girls who could see things no human being was ever supposed to see. One of them was blind, and somehow she was the one who saw the most. This is not a ghost story. This is not a monster story. This is something far worse. Because everything you're about to hear actually makes sense, and that's exactly what should terrify you. Stay with me. You need to hear how this ends. The Calloway twins were born on the same night, at the same hour, in the same delivery room, and from the very first second, the doctors knew something was different about the younger one. Her name was Clara, and her eyes were open, but they saw nothing. Congenital blindness, the doctors called it. The optic nerves had never fully developed. Clara would grow up in permanent darkness, and there was nothing medicine could do about it. Her parents, Richard and Diane, held it together in the hospital. They fell apart in the car on the way home. Her twin sister Mara was perfectly healthy. Perfect vision, perfect reflexes, perfect everything. And from the very beginning, Mara seemed to understand that her sister existed in a different world. Not a lesser world, just a different one. They grew up inseparable. Where one went, the other followed. Mara described everything she saw to Clara with the patience of someone twice her age. The color of the autumn leaves outside their bedroom window, the shape of clouds, the way a candle flame moved in the dark. And Clara listened with an intensity that made grown adults uncomfortable. Like she was recording everything, filing it away somewhere deep. When they were around 6 years old, they invented a game. Mara called it Looking Glass. The rules were simple. They'd hold hands, close their eyes, or in Clara's case, just focus. And Mara would describe out loud what she saw. But here's where it got strange. Clara would finish Mara's sentences. Not guess them, finish them. Before Mara had a chance to say the words, Clara would speak them, quietly, accurately, every single time. Their parents thought it was a twin thing, a cute little trick. They laughed about it at dinner parties. They had no idea what they were actually watching. It wasn't until a school field trip to a natural history museum that things shifted. Mara's class went without Clara. Different grades, different schedules. That evening, Mara was doing homework when Clara walked over and sat beside her, uninvited. "The dinosaur skeleton in the big room," Clara said. "The one with the long neck. There was a crack in the third rib from the left. Did you see it?" Mara went completely still. She had seen it. She'd run her fingers along the exhibit barrier directly across from that exact spot. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone. She hadn't even thought about it since coming home. "How do you know that?" Mara asked. Clara tilted her head. "I went with you." That night, neither of them slept. Over the following months, they tested it carefully, the way children do when they stumble onto something that feels enormous and fragile at the same time. They'd separate during the day, go to different places, and compare notes in the evening. What Mara saw, Clara saw. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough that both of them stopped being surprised and started being curious. The range grew. Mara would walk to school, and Clara, sitting in their bedroom at home, could describe the color of the neighbor's new car, the dog tied up outside the pharmacy, the way the morning light hit the water tower on 5th Street. Details Mara hadn't consciously registered. Details her eyes had captured without her brain bothering to process them. Clara was processing them instead. It was like Mara's eyes were a camera, and Clara was the one watching the feed. But then Clara told Mara something that changed everything. "I can show you things too," she said, "through my eyes." "You're blind," Mara said. "There's nothing to see." "That's not true," Clara said, and she held out her hand. Mara took it. What happened next is the kind of thing that breaks a person's ability to describe experience. Mara said later, much later, that it felt like the floor disappeared, like the room disappeared, like she disappeared. And in the place of all that nothing, there was something else. She saw colors that don't exist in the visible spectrum. She saw shapes that had no names. She saw what she could only describe as the architecture of existence itself, layers of reality stacked on top of each other like transparencies, each one slightly out of phase with the last. She saw time not as a line, but as a texture. She saw the threads that connect people to places, people to each other, the living to the dead. She saw a version of their house in which their parents had never come home from a drive they hadn't taken yet. She saw a dark place at the edge of everything, not frightening at first, just enormous. The way standing at the rim of the Grand Canyon isn't frightening until you realize there's nothing stopping you from falling. And then she looked closer. And she realized the darkness was full. Whatever was inside it was aware of her. She let go of Clara's hand so fast she knocked over a lamp. For 3 days after that, Mara couldn't fully sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back at that edge. Not seeing the thing inside, just knowing it was looking back. She didn't tell Clara what she'd seen, not all of it, but Clara already knew. "It saw you," Clara said on the third morning, matter-of-factly, while pouring cereal. "It sees everyone eventually. Most people just never get close enough to notice." "What is it?" Mara asked. Clara was quiet for a long moment. "The place where things go when they stop existing," she finally said. "Not death, not hell, something older than both. Before everything was here, that was here. And when everything is gone, it'll still be here." Mara stared at her sister. "How long have you been able to see that?" "Always," Clara said. "I thought everyone could. Then I realized the rest of you just had too much else to look at." They kept playing looking glass. They couldn't stop. It had become as natural as breathing, this constant, low-level sharing of perception that lived between them like a third presence in every room. They started seeing more together than either could alone. Mara's eyes gave Clara the world. Clara's eyes gave Mara something beyond it. But the cost started showing. They were 9 years old the first time Clara collapsed at school. The doctors initially attributed it to low blood pressure, poor nutrition, a dozen benign explanations. But when it happened again 2 months later, and when Mara fainted the same afternoon in a different classroom, their parents stopped accepting benign explanations. The scans came back with results that made the radiologist read them twice. Both girls. Both occipital lobes, the region of the brain governing visual processing. Tumors. Identical in location, nearly identical in size. A type of malignant glioma almost never seen in children. The oncologist who reviewed the scans said she'd been practicing for 22 years and had never seen anything like it. "There's no biological mechanism," she told Richard and Diane in a voice carefully stripped of emotion. "Twin concordance for this tumor type in adults is essentially 0. For children in this location, there's no data, because it doesn't happen." But it was happening. Clara, when she found out, was the calmer of the two. She sat with the diagnosis for a day, then told Mara she'd already seen this coming. Not the exact details, but she'd seen the shape of it, a narrowing in the future threads, a place where the paths converged to a single point. "Are you scared?" Mara asked. "Of dying?" Clara said. "Not really. I've seen what's on the other side often enough that it doesn't feel like a wall anymore." "And the dark place?" Mara asked. "The thing inside it?" Clara didn't answer right away. "That," she said, "is not on the other side. That's somewhere else entirely. And no, I am not going there." The certainty in her voice was the most frightening and the most comforting thing Mara had ever heard. Treatment began. Chemotherapy, clinical trials, every option their parents could fight to access. The girls handled it with a quiet grace that shamed the adults around them. They never stopped playing looking glass. In the hospital room they shared, while their bodies endured things bodies were never designed to endure, their minds traveled. The Serengeti, the northern lights over Iceland, the deep ocean shelf where light ends and pressure begins, the surface of Mars at sunrise, which is blue, not red. Clara had always known this and told Mara once, and Mara looked it up afterward and confirmed it, and couldn't explain how her blind sister had known. In those final months, they also saw the future. Not much, not clearly, but enough. They saw their parents growing old together. They saw their father planting something in the backyard of a house they'd never lived in. They saw their mother, decades from now, holding a photograph and smiling, not happy exactly, but at peace in the way that only comes after enough time has passed. Mara described all of this out loud. Clara listened. Neither of them cried about it. Near the end, Clara told Mara something she'd never said directly before. "You'll still be able to see what I see," Clara said. "After." "That's not possible," Mara said. "Neither was any of this," Clara said. Clara went first, on a Thursday morning in early spring. Mara was holding her hand. Their parents were in the room. And then, Mara said, for one single moment, she saw through her sister's eyes one last time. She saw light. Not the white light people describe in near-death experiences, something more specific than that, more structured. Like the light had a direction, and everything around it was oriented in relation to that direction. And at the center of it, Clara, with her eyes fully open, seeing everything, completely and finally free of the darkness she'd been born into. And then it was gone. Mara survived. The tumor responded to treatment in ways that baffled the medical team, responding exactly as if it had simply decided to stop growing. Unexplained remission. No one could account for it. Some of the doctors wrote papers about it. None of their papers explained it. Mara grew up. She has never fully described what she saw in those last moments to anyone. Not in any interview, not in any conversation, not even in the private journals she's kept since she was 12. What she has said, in a single recorded conversation, years after, is this. The dark place she saw through Clara's eyes when she was a child, she never saw it again. Not once. Not through Clara while she was alive, and not in any dream or vision since. It simply wasn't there anymore. And when she was pressed on what that meant, whether Clara had somehow sealed it or defeated it, or whether it had simply moved on, Mara went quiet for a very long time. And then she said, I don't think it moved on. I think it's still there. I think it's always there. I think most of us are just lucky enough that we never see it looking back. She paused. Clara wasn't lucky like that. She was born already seeing it, and she spent her whole life making sure it never once got any closer. Think about that for a moment. There are people walking through this world right now, in your city, maybe on your street, who were born with a sight most of us will never have. Not the kind that sees light, the kind that sees through it. They don't talk about it because they learned early that talking about it changes nothing and changes everything. They carry it quietly, the weight of seeing what exists at the edge of perception, the structure underneath reality, the darkness beyond the last star, the thing that was here before anything else was. And the only question worth sitting with in the dark before you sleep tonight is this. If Clara could see that place her whole life, and she wasn't afraid of it, what did she know about it that the rest of us don't?